Hi, everyone. It's so nice to see you all again. My name is Sharon Chaden Burks. I'm an instructional designer for Sinclair Community College, here for the Idea Networking session. I'm so glad to see some repeat faces. Hope things are going well for you. I am happy to bring you two new guest speakers today. One is one of my colleagues from Sinclair, um, Chris Prokes, and I'll let him explain what he does at Sinclair. And our other guest speaker is Amy Lomellini, and she knows Chris from graduate school. So I will let them introduce themselves more and explain what they have to share about their career journeys. And as they're talking, please write down your questions, and you'll have time to go into breakout rooms and speak with the guest speakers, or you can stay out in the main room with me and chat with me. We didn't talk about order of who goes first. Amy, do you want to start since you've been in the room a little bit longer?
Sure, why not? So, hi everyone. I'm Dr. Amy Lomellini, and I am the product accessibility lead at Anthology. So, in case you're not familiar, Anthology is the parent company. We have a lot of different products, including Blackboard, so Learn, Ally. We have student information systems like Anthology Students, Reach, lots of different products. And so my role currently is to work with our product teams, so our designers, our developers, our PMs, and really across the organization. I work with them to help them think about accessibility and help incorporate accessibility into everything that we do. I have a doctorate from Boise State. That's how I know Chris in educational technology. And prior to coming to Anthology, I was an instructional designer for several years and an associate director of online learning. And so I'm sure we'll get into it more, but my career path is all sorts of fun. So I'll throw it to Chris and then we'll get into details in a little bit.
Thanks, Amy. As Sharon mentioned, I'm Chris Prokes. I work at Sinclair Community College as well, in the same division as Sharon. I'm the program director for strategy and innovation for e-learning. My job is to oversee all of the large-scale projects that we do in the division. We are effectively an enterprise within the college itself. We have almost 40 employees who manage all of our distance education options in our portfolio. We run an innovation lab center, which is to onboard and scale up technology for use in teaching and learning. We work directly with our Center for Teaching and Learning that trains faculty on improved teaching practice and pedagogy. And then we do a lot of our outreach further into the community. It's a newer center that we've just launched this year, so there's quite a bit of legwork to be done. As Amy mentioned, I also went to Boise State University. The blue shirt today is not intentional, it's just what I picked wardrobe wise. But I have been on the blue turf. If you've ever watched their football team, I did go to graduation. I completed my doctorate in 2021. And I'll talk more about this later, but I'm formerly a K-12 classroom teacher and administrator.
Amy, I put the spotlight back on you.
Oh, fun.
You want to tell us just a little bit about how you moved from your previous career to your current career?
Yeah, so even starting a little bit before that, I love to travel. And so I was actually living in Peru in South America for a while in the Andes Mountains, if anyone's ever been to Machu Picchu. So I was living right at the foothills of the Andes Mountain. It's where I found my dog who passed away last year, but also my husband. But Kim liked that one. Long story short, when I was living there, I knew I wanted to come back to America at some point. So I wanted to complete my bachelor's degree. And so I actually started online learning. So I took classes at University of North Carolina, Greensboro, while I was living in Peru. And that's when I really fell in love with online learning. And when I got back to the States, I was like, I want to do this. So to get my foot in the door, I used that, like I leveraged that experience of being an online student and became an online learning coordinator, helping other students kind of realize that same potential that online learning could give. As I was working there, I met an instructional designer who was an alumni of Boise State. And we got to talking about what he does and how he really likes it. And I was like, wow, this is cool. I didn't know that was a job. Like, even further helping people understand online learning and design better courses so that everybody can access them and can learn better, right? And so I started my program at Boise, and I've had a complicated medical history my whole life, but when I started at Boise, I got a neuromuscular disease called CIDP, and I was paralyzed basically from the waist down. And I started my program at Boise State in physical rehab after getting out of the ICU. And I didn't tell anybody what I was going through because I didn't know what I was going through. I didn't know how it would affect me permanently. I told my boss I'd be back at work the next week. I was in ICU. That didn't happen. So, how do you approach, somebody that you've never met? So in this case, like a faculty member who I've never met, I'm trying to impress, right? I just started the program. He was my advisor, this person, and so I never told anybody that I was going through all these issues. And most people don't, most disabled folks don't. It took me a while to identify as disabled. And then I learned throughout that master's program that accessibility is an actual career path. And the intersection of accessibility and instructional design and educational technology, that was something I could actually do. So then as I started working as an instructional designer out of that master's program, um, I really focused. It was like my niche. Of course, I did all instructional design. I was able to, do all the things that calls for, but I had this specialty in accessibility because I'd gone through things. I was still going through things. I use a wheelchair. I'm still very much disabled and still identify that way. And it's been a journey in my understanding of it. And I've been learning throughout in how I can share that passion and make sure that online learning is really accessible for everybody. And that is kind of then how I led after it became my specialty and so many years of practice. That was really how I got my current job. If anybody's familiar with Anthology Ally, it's an accessibility tool that goes into an LMS or learning management system, and it has a ton of community support. So there's this like big Ally user group, and I was actually on that user group, and they posted my current job. And so because I was active in that user group, I like knew people, I had the story, I had brought Ally as an accessibility tool to the institution that I was working at. And through all of that, I was able to bring that onto my interview and talk about how I use your products. I'm disabled. I have expertise in accessibility, and kind of use all of my experience, not just in accessibility, but also instructional design and higher ed in general. And I was able to bring that to my current role. Long-winded answer of how I got where I am.
Totally fine. I didn't think it was that long-winded.
Okay.
Chris, I'm gonna pose the same question to you. Do you want to summarize how you got from your teaching career to where you are now?
Sure. I like I mentioned, a classroom teacher in K-12. I taught social studies, and when I was in school, originally the culture was very much like you're going to get a license to teach these sixth grades. You're going to get a license to teach this subject, and that's all you're ever going to do. You'll probably start in a classroom and retire from the same one. And at the time, when you're 18 years old in college, you're like, hey, this sounds good. This is what I want to do. And I got to about my 10th year, and after all those years, I got very professionally restless, and I found that I was not getting the challenge I needed to be successful. And I was less excited about doing fun, innovative things with my middle schoolers. And at the end of one of the school years, my principal, who was a really good leader, a really good guy, but he pulled me aside and said, "Hey, our computer teacher, who also did tech support and ran study hall, is retiring, and due to budget cuts, this was in the middle of the recession earlier this century. For those of you who are old enough to remember it, is retiring, and we're not going to replace him. So you seem to know what you're doing with technology, so you're in charge of all of that now. And by the way, you have to teach the computer classes." Because at the time in Ohio, you didn't have to have a license to teach electives. You just had to know what you were doing. So very quickly over the summer, I learned how to do all the teaching of these classes and all the hardware support and software support of our gradebook, of this online learning system we were running for our entire county for students who had major issues and couldn't come to school physically but could do it at a distance. All of our print infrastructure, our email infrastructure, all of these things short of running the actual like network servers. And it was a very quick learning experience, but I found how much I enjoyed working with technology and working with students who were going to learn in different ways. And so I did that for about 3 years. And then due to some other reasons, I just decided that after teaching, doing all that, being assistant principal and the athletics director and the summer school coordinator, I was just kind of mentally exhausted. So I took a role at Sinclair doing instructional design because the job posting at the time said pretty much everything I was doing except focus exclusively on online learning. So I went to Sinclair in 2015 and did instructional design for 5 years, and was actually supposed to take a new position doing similar to what I do now, literally on March 15th, 2020, which of course is, like the pandemic starting as a whole. And so I did that for another few months and then took the current role. And it's been really fun to be able to use what I'd learned as a teacher and as an instructional designer and just a professional in the field to grow into a more of a leadership role and seeing where we can take technology and technology infused pedagogy moving forward. So it's been a wild ride, but I love what I do. And whoever, I just saw the comment come up about did it all. Absolutely. I still have the dark circles under my eyes because it was a lot. But in 2016, I decided to go back to school again and pursue a doctorate. And I have absolutely no regrets about the hard work that went into those 4 years. I'm glad it's done. I don't want to do it ever again. There's something gratifying about getting like solicitory emails about come explore our graduate programs and being like, I don't ever have to do that again. So I will gladly pass them on to others. But it's been a great experience.
To kind of piggyback a little bit off of what Chris said, I think what's really cool is when all of your kind of your skill sets, your different ideas come together. So for me personally, I like teaching. I was teaching in person and online. I was able to bring that. I was an online student. I'm disabled. I've, experienced things in that realm. Technology and bringing together technologically infused pedagogy and all of that kind of came together in my current role and even in my ID roles as well. And when you're using multiple skill sets that you've built up over time, it's sort of empowering. It's like, yeah, I can do this. And it's, I think, more fulfilling in that way when you find whatever your niche is. And it doesn't have to be what we're talking about, but when you find a way to bring your skill set together and find that job that wants you to do that, I think that's really a cool place to be.
Yeah, I'll add to that real quick that, like I mentioned as a teacher, it was this is what you're going to do for your entire career. But you don't realize the other skills that you get that are related to instruction that come with it and the ones that you get over time and grow. I mean, when I started teaching, we still use, overhead projectors for everything. And by the time I left K-12, and this is now almost 10 years, every classroom had a smart board, every classroom had an LCD projector. We had laptop carts galore. We had like 5 computer labs. And there's something to be said about how you work to gain all of those things, because it certainly isn't the administration is doing. It's the teachers who are boots on the ground who are trying to get all that stuff into the classrooms.
Yeah. I want to add, both of you talked about, you didn't use the word specifically, but the theme is there. It's flexibility. And teachers, if you've been teaching even for just a year, you have developed flexibility that is so critical in so many different jobs because everything is changing. There are so many, so many careers are at inflection points with artificial intelligence coming in and people realizing that they don't have to do the things they were trained to do necessarily anymore. In fact, they have to kind of turn a little bit, do something a little bit differently because now we have AI available to help with the things that we didn't know we would have help with. And new jobs are being created. And like Chris said, this thought that we were trained as teachers to do a job for 25 or 30 years. Come on. I mean, no job stays the same anymore for even 5 years. Software changes. There's just constantly new ways of doing things. Cindy has a question in the chat for Amy. She says, does your role dealing with accessibility ever involve remediating e-learning and documents to be 508 compliant?
So
Go ahead.
yeah, in many ways, what I really do is teach other people to learn how to do that themselves. I'm very much of the mindset and I never get this right, if you give a person a fish, they eat for a day, and if you teach them to fish, they can eat for life. Did I get it right that time?
Yeah.
Okay, I always mix that up, but I'm very much of that mindset. So yes, I can take your document and I can remediate it for you, but at the end of the day, does that help? No, because then you're going to have another document tomorrow that you don't know what to do with, and you have to keep coming back to me. So that's not all that helpful. So what I've done is teach other people how to do that, develop trainings for that. Anthology Ally is another tool that can help in that regard as well. And by teaching other people how to do it, that's using my instructional design. It's using my teaching experience. It's using all of that to empower people to do better, right? So when you know better, you do better. And teaching other people to be able to do that, I think is really cool. And I like to see when they get it and that aha moment. I'm sure all teachers can understand that. But yeah, so teaching other people to design with accessibility in mind. How do we take a document from the start instead of trying to remediate a PDF? Ooh. Yeah, how do we take it from the start and think about accessibility? So that is a big part of my role in general. And I think, Sharon, to speak to your point a little bit, I made my niche, and that's what I think made me marketable. So for me, that niche happened to be accessibility, but there's so many others out there. And every role that I've had, I've taken it, and within the bounds of my role, I've done something that gave me joy and passion. So when I was an ID, I was making courses about accessibility. I was, leading work streams or committees on accessibility. I was doing everything I can within my role about accessibility. And ultimately, that's what led me to this job that I currently have. Now that I'm here, I have freedom to explore even more. So I'm pushing the bounds. So you're talking about AI. So I'm working with all of our AI infused solutions and making sure that not only is the output accessible, but also is the input accessible. Can disabled people actually use these tools that we're putting out there? And making sure that we can do what we can in that regard. So now AI is kind of a pivot point, and it's something that keeps me engaged. And I'm always looking for that next thing that's going to be my next sort of differentiator from everybody else in the field.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. Before we go into our whole group Q&A, I want to mention that our next networking session is going to be Tuesday, July 2nd from 7 to 8. I will put the link to the registration for that session into the chat. Sign up so you're here next month. You can feel free to do so. And if you want to put on your calendars for August, we will be meeting Tuesday, August 6th from 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern both days. So feel free to come to one or both. Happy to have you here. And we're going to open it up to whole group Q&A. Do you have any questions for the whole group? I will toot the horn for Keitaro, who told me during our session, and yes, I'm going to embarrass you. He got a job. So he started, he said he started looking in February and he got his first job and was chatting about it. I was so excited for him. So excellent. Anyone have any questions? Want to put out there? Oh, nice. I like your celebratory confetti poppers, June. I don't know how you did that. Is that one of the reactions? I only get a little one. How do you get so many, June?
I think it's the effect versus the reaction.
Oh.
So like effect did all of them, and then the reaction is just the one in the top corner.
These are important questions. I mean, really, I want to know, how do I get confetti poppers all over my head? Anyway.
It's a quality of life thing. It makes the experience more fun. That's all the ID theory. So it checks out.
There you go. All right. Questions out there. Unmute yourself or raise your hand as you will.
So I started my career as math professor at a junior college and taught there for 7 years. During my master's, I taught for 3 years, and eventually I ended up in graphic and web design, did that for a little while, then did my own company. And now my last job was a learning and development specialist. I got laid off, and but I really enjoyed um, instructional design because it used a lot of my skills, my education skills, my design skills, and a lot of different things. Anyway, but I'm applying to these jobs with 200 other people, and I guess on my resume it shows that I have 1 year of, instructional design. And yet I feel like I have these transferable skills that I've picked up both in everything that I've done in the past. And so any suggestions on how to kind of break into the field? I mean,
I'll say that when I was applying for instructional design positions, there we go. Sorry, I froze for a second. When I was applying for instructional design positions, there's generally a question like, how many years experience do you have?
Mhm.
I counted all the years that I did from teaching and from anything that I was doing that was instructional design tangential. I counted that.
Okay.
So I put down like 5 years and it was, unofficial. And maybe that helped get a foot in the door. Of course, my resume was what it was, but also I tried to emphasize on my resume all of the ways that I was doing instructional design, even if it was a teaching position. So I designed the courses that I was teaching. I taught online. I
Yeah.
designed those courses. So that was the point. Instead of saying I had 300 kids or whatever it was, I was talking more about the design because that's what I was applying for. So really
Okay.
tailoring your resume and don't sell yourself short. Like whatever you've done that's even tangentially related, that's what you highlight.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Yeah, I would agree with that. As I said earlier at the beginning, when I saw the job description for the instructional design role, it's like I literally am doing all of this. It's just this position was e-learning focused, but when it was one of the statements I remember was like develops assessments aligned with course and unit objectives. I'm like, well, I already do that. So give those examples and have that stuff that's there, even if it's not specific to a mode that they're trying to get you to do or a larger perspective. It does show that you know what you're doing, and even if it's only say 90% of what they're looking for, they can teach you the other 10%.
One of the other things
Okay.
I did to land that my first instructional design job was I researched the institution and I saw what they needed and I created just like a PowerPoint slide deck that was well put together. So it was designed well, right? That was like part of my
Mhm.
point there. And I also highlighted ways that I thought I could help. So I looked at their website and I highlighted that I had done some web design work and in a role as an advisor, I was in charge of the website and I increased the views by like 230%. So I said I could do that for them. Like, and here's some of my ideas on how, your website, without telling them the website was terrible.
Mhm.
I was like, here's some ways that I think I could help with this. And that was one of the things they were looking for. Right. And then same with some of the other aspects. I was like, I noticed you had this posted. Have you thought about the accessibility of this document? And like by doing that, I was showing my value. I wasn't calling them out on being bad, but I was in a good light, showing that I had skill sets that would complement their team. And it also showed, it showed dedication that I was researching that institution. But to be honest, and don't tell them this is recorded, right? Oh well. That same presentation was easily tweakable for other things. So I'll swap out a picture of their website for the next place that you're interviewing.
Mhm.
And it's the same deck and it's the same pitch, but you're just showing how you could help in different institutions.
Okay, great. Thank you both.
Another thing you might consider doing it when you research institutions is if you find anything about how they do their instructional design practice, take a look at those processes and see if you can share not a completely different one, but a different take on how they set that up. I did that approach to a limited extent. I pitched it as like this acronym. I can't remember what it was, but it was basically like emphasizing the single point of contact for instructional design as like the project manager. And they were doing this, but not really thinking of it that way. So I brought a couple of different perspectives on how the educator as leader can help with creating good learning solutions. And that I just remember, like, you look at the room as you're interviewing, and like a lot of ears were perking up, going, "Oh, okay, I see what you're saying here." It was just a different perspective. I think this is the fastest I've accepted LinkedIn invitations in a long time. So you are all inspiring me. And one of you is like right down the street from me. I didn't even think about geography. I was like, oh hey. If there's no other questions, Sharon, I always have a final thought I've been thinking about for the
Please
last little bit,
do.
if you'd let me to share.
I'll
So, one of the benefits of this field is professional networks. And you have one, obviously, I can tell you all have a good one here. Some of you are probably constant attendees at this. Some of you might be here for the first or second time. This is my first one. I can just tell from some of the conversation happening that many of you are very close. I remember the first time I met Amy was at a conference. She was not yet a Boise State student. I was there with another student who also happened to be very tall. I'm 6'7", FYI. And we stood next to her and she looked up and said, "Why do you two have to be so daggone tall in this moment?" And from that point forward, we just became good friends and colleagues, and we've done a lot of things together over the years. And um, that type of stuff grows what you do. I've gone to her with accessibility issues as I'm in charge of a lot of our accessibility work, and I'm way under knowledgeable compared to her. And this is just a friendly conversation. This isn't me going to Anthology for formal advice, although we are an ally customer. And sometimes it's venting to each other about concerns, or I'll say, I can't believe what this one person did on their course page. And those types of things grow you as a professional and can lead you down paths you never thought. I never thought I'd be doing accessibility at the level I am, but I am, and I absolutely love the work. It's something I never really thought much about until the last couple of years. So keep doing these types of things and keep connecting with each other, because we all in this together for in reality.
Yeah, I'll definitely second that. I mean, Chris and I went to the same program, but it was an online learning program, and he was in a different year than I was. So we never would have met if we hadn't been at that conference. And our program, kind of pushed that conference. And so by being there, we got to meet different people. And out of that conference, I have worked on research with different folks. I've worked, I lead their accessibility committee now. I do all sorts of different things, and the opportunities grew out of that networking chance that I had by going to those conferences and meeting people like Chris and others within the organization. And Chris and I were talking earlier, he's in this committee, I'm in that committee, and we kind of fill each other in on what the happenings are. And you can't be everywhere at once, right? So having those networks, having those connections, more often than not, even just following people on LinkedIn, people are posting jobs. And if you reach out and be like, hey, I'm a part of that organization too, like, what's this all about? Or maybe I'm going to meet up with you at the conference and we can talk it through. Like, you get that sort of inside knowledge and inside scoop. So definitely these sorts of networking events are really helpful.
I'll always say that networking is helpful. And I say that as an introvert when I go to a conference, I'm like, oh, here we go. Okay, deep breath, you can do it. And I always feel better, after I've done it. But I do have that moment right before I go into like the small talk with like the breakfast buffet, or it's like, okay, you can do it. You've done it all those times before. And then you realize, wow, I met a couple people that were actually super interesting and fun to talk to, and maybe I'll get to work with them again. So
The funny part about Amy and I meeting is the other gentleman who was there, who was in my cohort, who I never yet met in person, a year in, lives in Kyrgyzstan. And so he's a light year, a world away, literally. And him and I felt like we had been good friends just because of our conversations online. And we still keep in touch to this day.
that's awesome. All right. Well, we are almost out of time. For those of you who want to get a head start and register for the August session on August 6th, you're free to do so. I put it in the chat. I am so grateful to Chris and Amy for coming and sharing their experience and their positivity and their enthusiasm for the field. And congratulations, Keitaro. I'm so happy for your new position. Can't wait to see where it goes. And I definitely expect that you're going to come back and talk about it as a guest speaker in the future when you're ready. It doesn't have to be next month. So I will look forward to seeing you guys on July 2nd, right before the US holiday of the 4th of July. Have a great
Thank you all for inviting me here and giving me the opportunity to speak to you. If I can be of any help, please don't hesitate to reach out. Catch me on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to continue talking. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chris. Bye all. Have a great night.
Thank you.